What the heck is pattern testing? Let's talk about it. I just finished making this awesome top, the Ribcage Riot top, for a pattern test for making things naughty, and I am about to be selecting pattern testers for my next pattern. So I thought this was a great opportunity for us to talk a little bit about pattern testing. We're going to talk about what it is, how it works, and then I thought we could go through the process together of selecting testers for my new pattern, the Showtime Bag. It's a Beetlejuice-inspired messenger bag, but I do include instructions in the pattern to make the bag in any size. First things first, let's establish what pattern testing is. Pattern testing is a process where pattern designers have crocheters follow along to their pattern and make the item to test the pattern before it is released to the general public. The pattern testers get a copy of the pattern for free to follow along as they make the item. During the process, the testers ask questions to ensure that they are understanding the instructions, and they end up with an item that looks like the intended finished result. If there are any errors or parts of the pattern that need clarification, the designer can address these issues before publication. This allows the designer to correct any mistakes in the pattern to help future customers avoid any difficulties that they may encounter in the process. Sometimes, testers even have awesome suggestions, customizations, or ideas to improve the pattern too. It's a great way to get to network with other crocheters and expand your skill set all at the same time. When a designer has a pattern finished, they will put out a tester call. Usually, this takes the form of a social media post showing the item to be tested and asking people to apply. Crocheters who are interested in testing this pattern will read all of the details in that post and then follow the directions that the crochet designer has laid out in that post. Sometimes that means filling out a Google form or messaging a designer. I think most of the posts that I see are asking crocheters to comment on that post if they would like to test the item. Tester calls are usually active for a period of time. Once that time is over, the designer will select their testers out of the pool of people who applied. When the tester pool's been selected, it is time for the pattern test to begin. Pattern tests will typically have a due date, which will vary based on the complexity of the pattern and the preferences of the designer who is running the test. Testers are expected to make the item and provide photos and feedback by the due date. What kind of feedback? Good question. Mostly, testers are pointing out any errors that they find. This could be things like missing or unclear instructions, incorrect stitch counts, typos, or any other errors that they may encounter. They may have suggestions for ways to eliminate confusion or to tweak the instructions to make them make more sense to the reader. Depending on your project, the feedback could include your yarn yardage used and hook size used, final size or measurements of your project, or time spent. After the pattern test is wrapped up, the designer will make any final adjustments to their pattern, and then it's time to release. The testers are given a final copy of the finished pattern, which will include photos of their finished items in a tester gallery somewhere in the pattern. Designers will typically also do pattern tester appreciation posts, where they will share their testers' work with their followers to celebrate the tester's contribution. That is a general rundown of the process, but you may still have some questions. Or perhaps you're online and you've heard all of the discourse about pattern testing on social media. Let's just dive into a little bit of it. Just a little. Do pattern testers get paid? That depends, but most of the time the answer to that question is no. Some larger designers may be given a yarn allowance for their testers, but most of the time, pattern testing is unpaid. Your compensation is usually the free pattern that you get, and that's it. Everyone has different motivations for crocheting, and some people are perfectly fine with their only compensation being a free pattern. If they were planning on making that pattern anyway, then testing it and getting it for free may seem like a savings to them. There's been a lot of discussion about this topic online. Pattern testers are a critical part of the pattern writing process and provide very valuable feedback. Many people argue that pattern testers deserve compensation. There's also an element of getting exposure as a form of payment, since the designer will be promoting you in their pattern and sharing photos of your work in tester appreciation posts. For some smaller crochet accounts that are trying to grow their reach, that exposure might be really valuable to them. I do personally feel that people deserve to be compensated for the work that they do. I do hope to be in a position one day soon to provide at minimum a yarn allowance to all of my pattern testers. To date, none of the projects I have done have been in collaboration with a large yarn company, and I have not been fortunate enough to work as a pattern tester on any kind of a testing project that had a yarn allowance. This seems to be pretty rare in crochet world from what I've seen. If you have any experience with this though, please be sure to leave me a comment down below. One thing that I've decided to do from now on is to give my pattern testers an additional free pattern as a compensation for their work. It was something that I picked up from a fellow creator, Drewby Zoo. I tested his Crowbot and Crowbot 3000 pattern earlier this year, and I was pleasantly surprised after the test wrapped up to receive an email from him telling me that I could have an additional free pattern of my choice. I liked it so much that I'm gonna do it too. For the pattern test on my Showtime bag, I am also planning on giving my pattern testers a small $10 Joann's gift card to at least help to cover some of the cost of their supplies. This is an involved project requiring a lot of specific materials, and I want to be sure that my pattern testers have all of the supplies that they need to complete the pattern. I've never done something like this before with any of my patterns, but I've decided that I want to be the change that I want to see in our community. I personally like to volunteer for as many pattern tests as my schedule will allow so that I can give back to the crochet community. As a designer, I frequently have tester calls and need pattern testers for my designs, so I vowed to test as many patterns as I possibly can as a way of giving back to other crochet designers in this community. Plus, I get to have fun meeting new people and trying new things. Like I said before, everybody has their own motivations for testing patterns. While it's not typically a paid job currently, there are some advantages to being a pattern tester, which will vary based on the test and the designer. As crocheting continues to grow in popularity, I really hope that this will become a paid position. How do testers get selected? Most of the time, a pattern designer will have a list of requirements laid out on their pattern tester call, saying exactly what they're looking for and what materials will be necessary for the project. If you read that and decide it's something that you can do, then you can apply. The application process will vary based on the designer, but most of them either ask you to fill out a Google form or comment on the tester call post. There will occasionally be instructions for you to comment something specific, like what color yarn or brand of yarn that you would use on the project if you were selected. The reason for this is to make sure that you can read things thoroughly and follow instructions. If you can't read a post and do what you're being asked to do, then the designer is going to have very little faith that you can do that with the pattern. Sometimes, tester calls will ask you to tag people, save the post, or share the post to your stories. This is another point of contention in the community. The opposition's stance is that the tester is already doing you a favor by testing your crochet pattern. They should not be responsible for doing any of the marketing. I've also seen some people say that they either don't like tagging people in comments for these kinds of posts or don't have anyone to tag. So if the testing call has this type of a requirement, they won't apply. Comments, shares, and saves are how the algorithms on social media decide what content to push. So there is a reason why these creators are asking you to do this. Personally, I don't like to ask people to tag people in the comments. I understand the reason for the approach. I just don't like to do it myself. It's not my vibe. I subscribe to the line of thinking that the pattern testers are already doing me a favor by testing my pattern. It's not their job to market my pattern as well. Don't get me wrong. Shares are always appreciated, and I truly love it when people share my work. I just don't want to make that a requirement for testing my patterns. However, I would personally not let these types of requirements stop me from applying to test a pattern that I was interested in. Everyone has to do what makes them feel comfortable, and that's okay. Another requirement for pattern testers may include having a crochet-themed social media account. This is yet another point of contention, since crocheters with smaller followings feel like they are being overlooked for pattern tests for people who have larger followings. I certainly can't speak for everyone, but the reason that I ask for you to have a crochet-themed social media account is so that I can see examples of your work. While I am sure that there are people out there with different reasoning, that is mine. I choose my pattern testers based on skills, and I like to have a mix of different crocheters in my test groups so that I can have a more accurate representation of how my pattern is going to be read and received. Also, I like to choose some testers who have and some testers who have not tested patterns before. And if it's an amigurumi project, I like to choose some crocheters who are going to be using different weights of yarn so that I can get an idea of what my design will look like in different brands and different gauges of yarn. That's the kind of thing we're going to be looking for today. I'm looking to pick 4 to 6 testers of varied skill levels. This project is a bit more advanced since it involves sewing a lining into a bag, so I'm not going to be picking anybody who is brand new to crochet. I would like to pick a couple of people who are very comfortable and confident with making and lining a crochet bag and using interfacing. But I would also like to choose a couple of people who are less experienced or would like to make different variations of the bag, potentially including someone who won't be lining the bag. They will all need to have some crochet experience to be considered though. I have my people apply to test using a Google form. I know it's an extra step to make people have to go through, but as a neurodivergent person, it really helps me to have all of the information secure in one place. I'll start by pulling up the Google form and scanning through all of the results grouped together. That way I can get a feel for what applicants we have. Then I will scroll to the question with everyone's social media handles and look for names that I might recognize. That does not mean that I'm going to be stacking my pattern test with people I know or mutuals. But I would like to look for names of followers who have said that they were going to apply to test, or people that I recognize from applying on previous pattern tests who did not get selected before. Then I will switch to individual responses and start to look at every single applicant. I'll check out their socials and see their skill level and assess it for this project. It helps me to keep a notepad handy during this process so I can jot down if I find someone that I like, which I will typically do by noting their application number. I try to immediately eliminate people who don't meet the criteria just to help narrow down the field. Once it is narrowed down a little bit, I can start to get to the harder part, which is making the final list. Okay, I've been working on this for quite a while, and I think I've got it narrowed down from 44 candidates down to about 14 or 15 candidates. That is still quite a lot of people to have to sort through, but that's a lot smaller than 44. So we're gonna keep working here, keep trying, and see if I can come up with a final list. My cat is right here needing attention too, though, so we're gonna take a small pet the cat break and then we're gonna finish selecting testers. It usually takes me a few hours to pick testers. I'm the kind of person who agonizes over every little decision, even simple things like emails or what I'm gonna eat that day. My overthinking knows no bounds. Fellow overthinkers out there will know what I'm talking about. After what felt like an eternity, I finally had my list of testers picked out. I tried to pick a couple of seasoned bag makers or pattern testers, as well as a couple of people who haven't tackled something like this before but feel confident that they can do so. I am so excited to get this pattern into testing. It is my most complex pattern to date, and I am brimming with nervous but excited energy. Before the test can begin though, I have to notify all of the testers that have been selected. I usually do this on my Instagram stories, and then I will go into my Instagram chats and start a group chat for all of the testers. I find that that is the easiest way for everyone to be on the same page with pattern changes and any kind of communication. After all that's done, I send all of my testers a link for the pattern and the test can begin. Something I started doing on my last pattern was emailing all of the people who applied but were not chosen to thank them for applying to test my pattern. For my last pattern, Peekaboo Pal's Pill Bug, I had quite a few newer crocheters applying to test my pattern, and some people who had never applied to test a pattern before. I was worried that they would take the rejection hard or feel bad about themselves when they did not get selected. So I drafted up an email and sent it to everyone who had applied but was not selected, and I even included a coupon so that they could get a discount on the pattern when it released. It seemed like a nice way to thank them for applying and to encourage them to keep applying for pattern tests in the future. I'm going to do that again with this pattern. I just really think it's a nice touch. If you're a crocheter who wants to get into testing patterns, these are my best tips. Take high quality, well-lit photos of your crochet work in natural light if possible. And if you feel comfortable, post those photos on social media. You've worked so hard to crochet an item, your picture should show how amazing all of your crochet is. Even if you don't want to post your photos online, I do recommend taking good, high quality photos of your crochet work so that you can look at them later. My next tip is it is much easier to get selected as a pattern tester if you are attempting to test designs from smaller creators. Giant crochet accounts tend to get a lot of visibility and thus a lot of applicants on their pattern tests. It can be really hard to stand out in a crowd, especially as a new crocheter when there are so many applicants. Take on a few tests from some smaller creators, and before you know it, you'll be getting selected for more and more tests. My final advice to you is please don't give up. I know it can be disappointing to deal with the rejection from pattern tests because I've been rejected from many pattern tests myself. But I promise it's not personal. There can be many reasons why a crocheter is not accepted for a pattern test, and usually it's never a personal judgment, so don't assume the worst. Have confidence in yourself and your abilities, and please keep going. You'd be surprised how much of success is just in the repetition. Well, I sure have talked a lot, and I have quite a lot of work left to do. I hope this video was helpful to you in understanding the pattern testing process, and that you had fun selecting my pattern testers with me. If you have questions about pattern testing, or you'd like to share your experiences or opinions on the matter, please leave me a comment. I would love to hear it. If you loved watching this, then give the video a like and consider subscribing because I upload crochet videos like this as well as tutorials every other Wednesday, and I love to make new crochet friends. Speaking of crochet friends, follow me on social media. I am Graceface Creates on all platforms. Now, I better go. I have a tester group to create. Thanks again for watching, and happy crocheting. This gives the pattern designer the chance. Come on. Why is talking so hard?